We take one egg, we crack it, as so. We have to let the white separate out, and then we pour out the egg yolk onto this piece of tissue, and then we pierce the membrane in the yolk and allow it to drain into this little pot that I've got here. And that is what we call the medium for my paint. I'm James Lynch. I'm a painter. I've been painting for some 25 years, and we're standing outside my house in Higham in Somerset. We came here in February one year, a very bleak February day, and we could see through the front window and through the back picture. There's a big picture window in the back of the house. We could see Glastonbury Tor slap bang in the middle of it. We just walked around in spellbound silence, just knew that this was the place we had to be. One of the beautiful things about this house is the studio, which has been converted from an old stable at the end of my garden. Has the most staggering view all the way across the Somerset levels towards the Mendips. The other thing I do is paragliding. It is actually one of my main forms of inspiration for the landscape paintings, because I've always painted landscapes from a fairly sort of aerial perspective. Dorset is ideal. I head off down to Backham, which is just south of Yeovil. Apart from that, we've got the north coast of Somerset, so we've got places near Minehead. You can look all the way across the Severn Estuary and see Wales on a clear day. I'm a landscape painter, and it comes from a love of the landscape, really, of being in the landscape. I need to feel part of the landscape, really. I need to feel that there's a reason for me being there. It's almost, dare I say, it's almost like a spiritual feeling. And I like to imagine the generations of people that have been there before, and the continuity of that whole thing is sort of reassuring and gives one almost a spiritual sense of being part of the landscape. I think I can only really paint landscapes when I feel rooted in them, which means that they have to really be in the southwest of England, I suppose. That's where my roots are, and I need to feel that I'm painting surroundings where I'm rooted. Right, now I'm going to mix up some paint in this plastic palette with the separate wells. I'm going to just have a quick think and decide what colour I'm going to... It goes right back to my childhood, really, because we didn't have a television.
How can I hope to be ever set at large again?
So I used to sit by the radio, and to entertain myself, I'd just find a bit of paper, listen to the radio and draw as I was listening to the radio. So the radio became a source of inspiration.
Bestowed upon such a number of fat, red-faced police.
So I'm going to take some egg yolk, put it in the palette, about that much. There's quite an art to this. You have to learn by trial and error, really. There's no easy way of doing this. How much? I had been looking at the old tempera paintings in the National Gallery, and I'd always loved the surface of those paintings and the brightness of the colours. I thought, I want to paint like that. I realised what I had was this absolutely gorgeous, glowing, living surface. It really is like a living paint. And I suppose it is a living paint, really, isn't it? It's egg yolk. I mean, it's alive, basically, isn't it? We're standing outside my studio, and we're looking at my 7 hens and 1 cockerel, which are my raw materials manufacturers. The hens are creating the egg yolks. The yolk binds the pigment together and binds that to the surface of the paint. It gives you a nice feeling of self-sufficiency, really. Painting in tempera requires what we call a gesso surface, which is basically a white plaster mixed with a rabbit skin glue. What you do, you have to mix up the rabbit skin glue first, I then have to heat it up. You mix that with the whiting. I then paint 5 layers of gesso onto the board, and then the very last layer I stipple it with the brush, and that gives it a bit of what we call tooth, which is where the paint actually binds to the surface. It allows the paint to stick to the surface. It has to be allowed to dry overnight, so it's ready to paint on the next day. So we're looking at 2 tempera panels here, which I'm working on both at the same time. These are both local views. The one on the left that we're looking at now is in a place called the Deverell Valley, and there are 3 little houses on a road from Kingston Deverell to Maiden Bradley, which seem to be a bit of a landmark, with this nice bright cumulus cloud appearing over the top of Cold Kitchen Hill. And then the one on the right is Glastonbury Tor, which I can see from my studio window, so I didn't need to go far for that. There's the tap. It's all very basic around here. Clean that out first. Right, now I'm going to mix up some paint in this plastic palette with the separate wells. I'm going to just have a quick think and decide what colour I'm going to mix up. In this one on the left, we've got a lot of quite bright cadmium green in the middle. Then we've got these 3 brilliant white houses. Down in the foreground, we've got, what have we got there? We've got red ochres. I've used French ultramarine. I like the style of the neo-romantic school of painters who were sort of 40s, 50s. People like Eric Ravilius. He was going around all over the country, really, painting the build-up to D-Day and this sort of thing. And his landscapes were so beautiful, watercolour landscapes. And it's very hard to pinpoint what it is in that era of painting that I like. It's quite sombre, like muted colours, but so full of atmosphere. I've got an Eric Ravilius catalogue here, so I can show you. This one here. This was an exhibition called Imagined Realities. Here we are. Firle Beacon, Sussex. See, look at very muted colours, but somehow it's got weather, hasn't it? It's got atmosphere. It's got it through the way that he's got the brush strokes, the wind in that field of corn, and these clouds. But it's very muted colour. It's a very clever use of colour. Almost understatement, isn't it? British understatement. That's what I'm about.